What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Project Cars 2 and the Ice Track Trials series. Today we're going to be taking 3 different cars down the Mercedes-Benz Ice Track, the second version of it. This is episode number 6. So we're going to be up to 18 cars at the end of this episode for this Ice Track Trials series. Our first vehicle for today is the Aston Martin Vantage GT12. Now, I love this. This has got to be one of my favorite Aston Martins. It's basically an Aston Martin Vantage, but the GT12, first of all, I love the orange. I mean, orange is pretty much my favorite color, and I think it goes with this car, and it just looks really, really nice. So yeah, really the look of this car, I think it has to be my favorite looking Aston Martin. It really does. I absolutely love it. The wing on the back and everything, just the shape of the car makes this car look just amazing. However, I wanted to see how it would go on the icy, snowy track. Now, this is of course a rear-wheel drive, pretty decent amount of power. I think it's got about 590 horsepower or something like that. And yeah, it's rear-wheel drive. So I was interested to see how it would go. It's in the Road C class, so not one of the quicker cars. I mean, we're not up there in Road B or Road A. We're in Road C, so we're not crazily quick to start with, but like, it's not hypercar supercar territory. This is kind of more of a high-end sports car, I would say, and I was interested to see how it would do. Now, this thing was actually pretty damn difficult. Getting on the power with almost 600 horsepower going through those rear wheels was actually pretty damn terrifying. I've had cars with the same sort of power as this and also rear wheel drive that have done a hell of a lot better and have been a hell of a lot easier to drive than this. The Jaguar F-Type SVR is a good example of that. I mean, that thing went really, really quick. 2 minutes 1 that car did, which is actually pretty damn quick. It's currently sitting at 5th place, and it is the fastest rear wheel drive car by a decent margin. It's in around about the same spot as this. It might even be a bit slower than this. On a normal track it would be slower than this, I imagine. However, this car is just not that easy to drive. Figuring out what gear to be in, sticking in mostly second and third most of the time because I could not put it to first. It would just spin. This car was a real handful to drive, so because of that, it actually didn't go particularly quick, but we'll find out how quick it went later on. The second car for today, I decided to go for a bit of a race car. Went for the BMW M1 Procar. I wanted to do a BMW. I was trying to find an all-wheel drive car to do, because it ends up being that all the cars today are rear-wheel drive. To be honest, most cars in Project Cars 2 are rear-wheel drive, so it's kind of hard sometimes to find, race cars, because a lot of the race cars, they, even like, I was just going to do like the Audi R8 GT3 car or something, but they convert them to rear-wheel drive so that everybody's kind of on a more even playing field. So it was going to be hard to find an all-wheel drive car, so I just decided to go for this M1 Procar. Yes, it's rear-wheel drive. It's got about 450-ish horsepower, I believe, so it's less powerful than the Aston Martin we just had. However, that is actually not a bad thing. Honestly, sometimes the less power they have, the easier the cars are to drive around this course, because the crazy power going through, especially through the rear wheels, really just does get the cars sliding and makes them really hard to drive. This car was a lot easier to drive than the Aston Martin. Although yes, this is a race car, you can almost say that the Aston Martin is kind of a race car-esque vehicle. I mean, it is a road car, but with the big wing, the low splitters, low body kit, it's almost a race car. So yes, this was actually a hell of a lot nicer to drive than the Aston, a lot easier to drive. Took me quite a few attempts to get the Vantage around the course. Only took me a couple of tries to get this BMW around the track. And yeah, I mean, although it definitely wasn't as quick accelerating and all that as the Aston Martin that we just drove, it was easy to drive. You could get on the power a hell of a lot easier. Even though it is still rear-wheel drive, you could just get on the power a lot easier with this car. And altogether, yeah, just not an easy car to drive, definitely, but compared to that Aston Martin, this BMW M1 was actually a pretty decent car to drive around this course. The BMW M1 is a car that I've never been the biggest fan of. I mean, it's okay, but I find it to be a bit bland. But yeah, I saw that it was in this game, haven't really driven it much before, so I thought I would give it a shot. The final car for today, I thought I'd go for something a bit crazy to finish off with, the Mazda MX-5 Radbul. Now, this is a drift car. If you don't know, at the moment, there's 2 drift cars in Project Cars 2. This and that Ford Mustang drift car that got added in, I believe it was the Fun car pack. I decided to go for this, mainly because we've had quite a few Fords go around this course, and I was a bit scared. Now, I usually set up, if the cars have a stable setup, I always use the stable setup. This only has a drift setup and a race setup. I decided to go on the race setup because on the drift setup this would have been terrifying. Off the line, this was terrifying. It took me about 3 attempts just to get this car off the line, because putting the power down just that little bit too much, it would just spin right off the line. I eventually managed to get it going though, and surprisingly, yes, it's on the race setting, but this is still a drift car. It actually wasn't terrible around the corners. Now, this was definitely harder to drive than the BMW, no doubt about that, but honestly, after you get it off the line, I think this Mazda was actually easier to drive than the Aston Martin. Now, bearing in mind that Aston Martin has 590 horsepower, it's a road car really, getting towards a track car, but it is really a road car, and this Mazda MX-5 has 1,200 horsepower. So we have doubled the horsepower of the Aston. We've got crazy body kits. It's probably actually a little bit higher up. It almost looks like it could be used for rallycross or something, although it isn't, it's a drift car. So you know what, it actually deals with this course surprisingly well. You have to be careful on the throttle, yes, but honestly, considering how it has twice as much horsepower as the Aston, you actually don't need to be as careful as you do with the Aston, and because of that, you can actually carry a lot more corner speed. You can be you have to be careful at the top of the revs. Top of the rev range, you have to be really careful, because if this car revs too hard, the turbos kick in. This thing has ridiculously powerful turbos. They'll kick in, they'll slide the car. But on the most part, the Mazda was actually not as difficult to drive as I was expecting, and it was actually easier to drive than the Aston Martin. So we get onto the times, and surprisingly the Mazda actually goes quickest off the cars today, up in 11th place with a 2-minute 4.460. It's not massively quick, but you know what, that's just over halfway through the order, and considering it's a crazy 1,200 horsepower drift car, I don't think that's a bad time at all. We have to go pretty far down into 16th place to find the BMW M1 Procar with a 2-minute 7.440. Yeah, it just doesn't really have, I don't know, it just isn't that quick, let's just say that. And then the Aston Martin in 17th place with a 2 minutes 8.310. That Aston is really not good around here. I was expecting that to be around the Jaguar F-Type up in 5th place, but it's way down the order. Yeah, that Aston Martin just not very good at driving in the snow and ice at all. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Comment what other cars you'd like to see me drive around the ice track trial circuit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.